The Catholic Church is known for integrating local customs to win converts. This is known as syncretism or acculturation. The Celtic goddess Brigid became Saint Brigid of Ireland. Images of the Virgin Mary are a reflection of Isis. The Aztec goddess Tonantzin became Our Lady of Guadalupe. The use of incense and elaborate processions in the Catholic liturgy comes from Roman pagan worship, such as those in the temples of Jupiter. The word Amen is tied to the Egyptian sun god Amun-Ra. And Aleister Crowley wrote that the Catholic Mass is the same as the Gnostic Mass, which is the central rite of the Ordo Templi Orientis. The Celtic festival of Samhain became All Saints' Day, and long before there was Easter, there was the Akito festival of ancient Babylon, the Anthesteria festival of ancient Greece, the Druidic Albanailir, the Roman festival Hilaria, which commemorated Attis's death and resurrection, and Sham el-Nassim of ancient Egypt. All of these celebrations were tied to the spring equinox and nature's renewal. They involved painted eggs, rabbits, and a period of fasting, followed by a feast. Before Christmas was ever celebrated on December 25th, there was the Roman pagan festival Saturnalia and the feast of Sol Invictus. These were winter solstice celebrations. Without the sun, we would not be alive, and so mankind has venerated the sun ever since Babylon, mostly during the winter solstice. Every year between December 21st and the 25th, there is an observable death and rebirth of the sun. As the sun reaches its lowest point in the sky, it appears to stop or die, and it is then reborn as it begins to rise again. Several characters in history appear to be personifications of this death and rebirth. In 336 AD, the Emperor Constantine established December 25th as the date to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. At the time, this was the birthday of Mithras and was observed as the Feast of the Sun, spelled S-U-N. After 336 AD, it became the Feast of the Sun, spelled S-O-N. Jordan Maxwell called this astrotheology and pointed to several of these astrological events encoded into the King James Bible: the 12 tribes of Israel, the 4 Gospels, the 7 seals, and the 4 horsemen. Kabbalistic research uses celestial symbolism of the planets and the zodiac to interpret biblical narratives, so this is nothing new. The 12 disciples of Jesus, the sun, represent the 12 constellations of the zodiac, traveled around by the sun. Mithras, the symbol of the sun, was often depicted being surrounded by the 12 constellations. Horus, the Egyptian god linked to the sun, was born during the winter solstice. His mother Isis was represented by the Virgin constellation Virgo, and his journey took him through 12 hours of night. The same solar symbolism can be seen in the historical characters of Krishna, Adonis, Tammuz, and Hercules. The 12 constellations of the zodiac coincide with the 12 months of the year and the 12 ages of the great year. Often referred to as the precession of the equinoxes, the great year is approximately 25,776 years, and divided by 12, each age is approximately 2,148 years. The age of Taurus was often represented by bull worship. The Persian sun god Mithras was known for slaying the bull, marking the end of the age of Taurus. Similar symbolism can be seen in the Bible. During the transition from the age of Taurus to the age of Aries, there is the golden calf rejection, ram sacrifices, and the Passover lamb. From Aries to Pisces, there is Jesus as the Lamb of God, transitioning to fish symbolism. And from Pisces to Aquarius, which is where we are at now, there is water bearer imagery in prophetic and apocalyptic texts. The cross itself is an ancient solar symbol, its 4 arms representing the solstices and equinoxes, which divide the 4 seasons. And the sun on the cross is the sun at its lowest point during the winter solstice, before it rises again. You can find much more of this fascinating research in the work of Jordan Maxwell and Michael Sarian. Greg Reese reporting.
Well, hello, Corey. How you doing tonight, man? Oh, I'm Mike muted. Hi, how you doing?
I think I unmuted you as you went to do the same. How you doing tonight, man?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. I figured that's a good way to start it off. I love that guy, Greg Reese.
Yeah, that was a well put together video there. I've never seen him before.
No?
No.
I love how he's always just like, hello, Corey, how are you doing tonight? Like, he's just like monotone, but to the point. I've never heard someone so monotone that actually grabs my attention.
Yeah, there were a lot of good points in that video that was well put together. The way he went from one thing to another and slapped it together.
Yeah, he's really good. That's Greg Reese, and like one thing we were talking about last time is obviously with everything the way it is, it's hard to find people that we can still like. It's hard to find something to watch where 20 minutes into it, I'm not like, okay, this is good, it's good, and then they say something, and I'm just like, okay, I'm out. But Greg Reese is one of them. That Ian Carroll, I noticed ever since he kind of did his little spotlight tour there, I think they got a grip on him. I think they did.
Seems so. He has spitting a lot of truth. You can always listen. This is something that I say to people too, like when we're talking about this kind of stuff. Just because they might be, I'm like, hey, that guy's totally aside. Like Tucker Carlson, right? I mean, you can listen to what he says, and you can, cross-reference a little bit of it to make sure it's 100% true. But you can still know that he's a paid establishment, puppet, right? At the same time, you can take good information. So the same goes with Ian Carroll, right? It seems like he might be selling out, but he's got lots of good info.
Well, that's one thing. I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to bring that up. Just by the way, folks, we're completely winging this. I only got home like half an hour ago. That's why we're doing it so late tonight. I had to drive my brother into town late. But I'm glad you brought that up because last week I didn't do a whole lot, obviously, but even when I'm not posting, I'm doing a lot of observing still. And one thing I'm observing is they're letting us talk about Israel on a massive scale right now.
Yeah.
And it leaves a lot of questions in my head as to why, especially on X. Like X right now, I set notifications for certain people. So whenever they make a post, I get a notification. And on X, it's not like Facebook where it doesn't work. Like I know there's people who follow me who have live notifications on. They don't get them. But on X, they don't fail. And right now on X, it's pretty wild. The content that's coming out about Israel, is it a trap? Are they setting it up for something else?
Which has crossed my mind too.
I have a lot of questions.
There's probably more possibilities that I'm not thinking of, but the first two that I think of are either getting us to do what we're doing because of the implementing the laws that are upcoming. Because as soon as those laws come and they start retroactively looking through people's Facebook, if they really want to go that way, they could get rid of us all easily. Anybody who's opposed, or it could be database type stuff. Who's going to talk about it? Who's against it? It could be the same as like all the other movements that we have. They like to keep the list. Whether it's a low list or a high list, it doesn't matter. They like to make sure they know who is who. So it could be that, or it could be because I always talk about what they've written in the past and the history books, and not the history books, but they're the guys who write the elite stuff that we never see their books. They write things like I've mentioned this one before, that they'll one day they'll be able to reveal themselves, and the entire world will have to accept it because we'll be so far gone at that point that there's nothing that we can do. And when I look around, I think we're so far gone that there's nothing that we can do unless, I think there's only a couple of things that we can really do to turn this thing around, and it doesn't seem like we're doing them. So I think that, that them revealing themselves really isn't really that surprising to me. It's.
I can get behind that. And actually that refers to one of the things I put in the caption there. I put in the caption, like I said, we're winging this one. We are going to talk about Mr. Carney a little bit. And then I have a 30-minute video to show after we gap here. We're not going to be on here too long tonight because we're so late. But I did my third point there. I put, as we continue to point out the truths and things, the most common question I receive is, what do we do? It's a great question. And though there are many things that can be done to prepare, I wish I had a full answer. These are untrodden waters. They call for I made a little typo there. They call for untrodden solutions. That being said, the indoctrination and division are at an all-time high. And that's, you see it too. People are asking us, well, okay, we see this, but what do we do? It's a great question. I wish I had an answer.
It's a wonderful question. Yeah, like there's suggestions that can go into that, but there really isn't. I don't think we have an answer right now because of the division, because of the psyops, because of the confusion. There's, you could say, okay, well, we could go the revolutionary way. Well, maybe. Is there enough people to really do that? Because I think that when it comes to us saying, yeah, okay, we outnumber the police, but are we adding in the military? Are we adding in the left who do believe in guns? Because there are a lot of them. Are we adding in, all of the different possibilities of, which way it could go?
It's
is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Anything is possible, but is it a smart thing to do when you've got such low numbers? Like, not people, this is why I've always turned it down when people say, oh, we're going to go and we're going to, storm this, storm this. Like, why? You're going to have 100 people there tops. And it always turns out that way.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but with what? This isn't 1776.
That's
We're
right.
taking guns to a drone fight.
Yes,
and that's
100%.
And you look at places like China. China has 100 million plus drones.
Mm-hmm.
They openly state that they're doing shows with a few 100,000 just to please the public at night.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing all these bots they're making that actually have muscular tissue. They're making human androids, and it's it's not 1776.
No, it's not.
And
then go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, the other options, we could collectively just say no to the system and turn it off. But again, you need a high level of participation. Every single answer requires a high level of participation, and we don't have that for one reason or another, no matter what it is. And so that's my answer to it: is we need to get to that. Let's get to unity. Let's get to forgetting about the noise. Let's teach people. And I'm not going to lie, I think it's going to take more than a generation. I think we're going to have to teach our kids, and they're going to have to teach their friends. Like, I could ramble about the generational thing, but the Marxism, right? How does it work? You got to reverse it. How do you reverse it? You do the same thing they've done, only backwards. So we were inactive for the entire time.
I agree. And I've said that for a while, and I know our whole group has. Like, I truly believe that it's our generation that exposes it, kind of not actually physically burning it to the ground, but it's our generation that burns it to the ground with the truth and exposing it for the next generation. But things are speeding up at such a pace here. And just before I forget, I answered a comment today, and it refers to what we were talking about there, because they're all on the same team. We know that. We know this is a global agenda. And Trump right now, he's a great man for this role, because not only is he playing the savior, he's not the Joe Biden bad guy, you know what I mean? But at the same time, there's another aspect to it that I thought about today. He's not only playing the savior, let me ask you a question. If there was one country in the world right now that the people could revolt and have success, what country would you pick?
No, it's the US for sure.
Okay.
They're the only ones with the legal backing to be able to do it, and the balls, the patriotism.
Right. So not only has he trapped the Christians, the right wing, and everybody, but he is also ensuring that while they implement all of this, the only populace that actually could still do that, maybe, will not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I have never thought of that. That's an extremely good point.
I didn't until today. Somebody said something, and I commented back, and while I was writing the comment, I was like, "Oh shit!" This is it's the same thing. He's playing the savior, but it's a whole different. I never thought about that angle either. Like, because we see in Canada just last week they put out a new thing, 100 and some guns now banned, and they're giving people a list of how to do them. So while they're implementing all of this, the only nation that's actually because the U.S. has over, I don't know if people are aware of these numbers, but the U.S. has over 20 million armed veterans that are under the age of 50. We're not talking about seniors that are going to the Legion to play crib. We're talking about armed veterans that are only considered veterans because of their fucking PTSD and what they've already done to fucking serve their country. These guys are physically able, and no other nation in the world has that.
That's right. And every one of them are armed to the teeth. They don't mess around when they get home. They get ready as soon as they get home because they know what's coming. Every one of them knows what's happening.
Well, it's just it. And it's, you know, a lot of them are part of, you know, biker clubs. And, you know, that's your, if you were to have a militia of the people like they did in 1776, when the American people said, no, we came here for a new life. We're not being the British bitches anymore. They can't. They're not. They're trumped. I hate to put it that way, but they're trumped.
The fitting name, isn't it?
Right? It's crazy. So, anyways, we'll get to a couple things here. Let's start with this here. Just pause this for a second here, and I'll bring it up. Because oh, my bad. Share screen. A lot of people. One thing I do get lately is too, you don't talk about Canada enough. And I'm going to say something here, and some people might not like it before I bring this video up here. The reason why I've been focused so much more on the States than Canada, Canada has done its role. Canada was founded and built to fund the Crown, to fund the Jesuits, to fund the Vatican. It does its role very well. Canada, and this is my opinion, Canada could be a powerhouse in the world if we put Canada first. With the resources we have, we would have to get our birth rate up awfully fast and quick. But if we were to put Canada first, like a certain man did in the 30s in Germany, it could be done. It could be done. But Canada is not a sovereign nation, and people need to remember that. Canada is a crown colony, has been from the get-go, still is today. And the reason why I haven't personally been touching on Canada a whole lot is because I'm sorry to be the one to say it, but Canada isn't a seat at the table. And I'm sorry to say that to people. We very well could be. But when you look at that table, Russia, US, China, North Korea, Canada, though we could be, we are not a seat at that table. We are a corporation that is dictated to by these nations that sit at the table. And that's, you know, look at even Trudeau was doing the agenda, but they still snubbed him at meetings and stuff. You know, they don't care about we're small on the totem pole, and people need to remember that. And, you know, maybe that's one of the biggest, when people say, what can we do? Well, we have to put Canada first, no matter what. Can you do it with our political system? In my opinion, not a chance. It's designed the way it is. I mean, Carney, for example, before he was even Liberal leader, I was saying, and you probably heard me say it more than once, that he's the Crown's accountant. He's worked for the Crown for a long fucking time, doing exactly what he's supposed to do. He destroyed the UK economy for the last decade. He's done a very good job of it. And, you know, we see him now in these speeches. He's talking like a conservative. He's barking right back at the reporters. He's not giving them really a chance to answer any bullshit questions. He won't talk about his companies. He won't talk about certain things. He's talking like a Trump. And I don't even know where I was getting at with that, but I don't think people realize that we're not a seat at that table quite yet.
Well, they're with the whole Carney thing, like with him doing, you know, the Trump play, but from the left, they're upping the ante on the division, right? Because now you've got left and right going, well, wait a minute here. You like left is going, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not going to switch to liberal this time. You know, you just got this fake war going back and forth because it really doesn't matter. Either one of them could get in, and both of them are going to do the same things.
Right.
Maybe with a little bit different attitude. That's
Minik says that the taxes of 1776 was the script for crossing borders into and past the Appalachian Territory and take treaty land. It's always about the same thing, land, and we're watching it play with a plot. Absolutely we are. Absolutely we are. Karen says Canada was on a list with the lowest GNP among a number of countries, 0.5%, I believe. That doesn't surprise me. And on what Monique said there, I did have a post earlier today about the land that I wanted to just read quickly here. Apologies. Like you said, we're winging tonight. I don't got much ready. Where was this about the land here? Right here. Here in America, to usher in Agenda 2030, we're a little more civilized about land grabs than they are in the Middle East. We don't fight over our land because of religion or our country and have governments commit open genocide like they do there. We just have natural weather events from geoengineered weather, HARP, and to do our land grabs for us. Then the people call for FEMA, they're a no-show, and the government and BlackRock come in and purchase the land after no one can afford to rebuild. The theft is all very civilized. It's such a great point. It's such a great 100%. Point. And again, I hate to be the one to say it. North Americans are very weak. They're not what they were 100 years ago. And that's the indoctrination. It's the convenience of technology. They've got us right where they want us. They've got us right where they want us.
Great week, man.
It's true. I'll bring this up quick. This was Mr. Carney today, and you talked about the division in his speeches as well. I want everybody to listen, because this speech isn't just about carbon tax. Listen to what he says here.
And we have the opportunity to diversify trade. Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the United Kingdom? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon.
I just want to stop that for a sec. So like we were talking about, if we were to put Canada first, he's kneeling to what they need. That is not putting he's in order for us to be in this inclusivity, in order for us to be included in this group, this is what we need to do. No, if he was going to put Canada first, he'd say, no, we're going to side with the U.S., whether or not Trump's compromised or not. We're going to side with the U.S. We're going to kick this climate bullshit to the curb, and we're going to put money back in the pockets of Canadians, put rational thought back in the pockets of Canadians. But no, he continues on, obviously.
So we are able to think one step ahead. We're able to go out and see the world. We're able to help Canadian companies prepare. And you know what's going to happen? 5 years, 10 years from now, if I have the pleasure of being in front of you, you'll be asking me the question, if we didn't do this, if we didn't help our companies get more prepared, the Americans are going to start caring about this again. They have elections every 4 years. They cared a great deal about this 3 months ago. Now all of a sudden they don't care about it. They're going to care about it again. We have an enormous opportunity here in Canada. The United Kingdom has an enormous opportunity. France has an enormous opportunity. Europe has an enormous opportunity to leapfrog over American companies. They're trying to turn back the clock and look inwards. We're going to take that opportunity. We're going to take that opportunity. It's going to create jobs, and it's going to create new markets for our country. On the other hand,
so he's not only just telling everybody straight up, we need the carbon tax to be a part of this club. He's also, what's he saying? He's literally saying we're gonna get Trump out of there in 4 years, and they're gonna put the climate thing back on. He's solidifying that divide that the tariffs have already caused between Canadians and Americans. So what is he? 3-4 days into office, and it's the same shit.
It's the stupidest oxymoron I've ever heard.
Right?
Like, while he's saying if we want to be a part of the club that the U.S. is in, we have to do what the opposite of the U.S. is doing in order to be accepted into the club that the U.S. is accepted into. What? What?
Crazy.
Yeah,
and there was somebody commenting there today too. Canada's not the only country with a carbon tax, and blah blah blah. And just like I explained to them. And what everybody just needs to realize is that we are carbon beings. If we eliminate the carbon, you're eliminating yourselves. That's
That's funny
crazy.
word magic right there.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And when I listen to people that are actually talking about climate change, like we're burning up the world, and I'm just like, do you understand that how big Canada is? Like, I've drove across this country 49 times.
Mhm.
If nobody has, and nobody's left their city or whatever, please don't comment on climate change, because it takes you 30 hours just to get across Ontario, and most of it is trees. Like, most of it is just trees. There's gaps in that drive where if like at nighttime in Northern Ontario, if you just fueled up and you just drive 20 kilometers and there's another gas station open, you fill up again, because that next stretch is like 500K before there's anything open.
Mhm.
People don't understand. They're sold on this we're overpopulated thing, and it's why I'm grateful that I went across the country at a young age, because you see, like, wow, this place is big, and it's not full of people.
Mhm.
It's full of trees. It's full of trees and nothing. Like,
Right. It's one of the reasons it's so sought after. So much
well,
space here, man. There's so many resources.
it's true. And I was thinking about that the other day too. I wonder, like, we're finding out all these truths like Tartaria and et cetera, et cetera. Did they know about the resources when they came here? After they've shortly got here? Like, you know, there's
I mean,
as
maybe.
as we learn more, there's so many questions to ask.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's wild.
It's an if and then thing, right? I mean, if they were more advanced than what we thought they were, then they were probably looking for resources. And if they came here, they probably, I mean, it's not going to be hard to know that there's some stuff here, you know? If you have any knowledge of how that works, then you're just going to come here and you'll be like, wow, this place
Right.
filled. Look at the mountains, look at the, you know. So
Well, it's like they sell people on, like, we're running out, what was it, like in the 70s, we're running out of oil. Was that the thing back then?
yeah.
I worked in the oil field in the Northwest Territories, in Northern Alberta and BC. There are, so in the winter they can drill up in the Northwest Territories and stuff, because they drill on the ice. They drive in on the ice. Actually, that's what my dad does. He's a ice road trucker in the winter, but when spring comes, there's just a capped wellhead out there in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. There are so many, like thousands of those capped wellheads, that they can't even get the oil and gas from. The average one could heat the city of Edmonton for 5 to 10 years. And there's thousands of them just sitting there while they tell everybody that we're short on all these resources and running out of them. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Scarcity has always been one of the things, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If they tell you we're going to run out of it, people just go nuts. And then they just find something else to do it about 6 months later.
What else did I want to bring up here? We got Carney and his carbon tax. Here's one about Carney. And switch over here, share this. Margaret Trudeau remarried and had 2 kids with Fried Kemper. That's Kyle Kemper's dad. Fried Kemper is the brother of Mark Carney's mother, Verlie Kemper. Mark Carney is the godfather of one of Chrystia Freeland's kids. This is some kind of weird cult we have here running the show in Canada. Yes, it is. It's called Freemasons and Jesuits.
Bloodlines.
I saw somebody who shared that, and they're like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, it's right in your meme. It's in your meme. What kind of weird cult is this? You're right there. You're right there. And I'm noticing that there are a lot of people on that cusp, and they're like, "What is going on? These people are all connected." And like, yes, these bloodlines have been trying to kill you for hundreds of years.
It's the
And
world
it's
domination cult. That's what kind it is. The world domination kind.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's and one thing I'm starting to see too is there's people who are starting to get it. But then they look at the movement and they're looking at all the infighting and certain individuals that are placed in the movement. And as much as they've figured out the government side of these secret societies and how all these people are together, for some reason in their head, the thought of that happening in the counter narrative is just blasphemy. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, if these societies can organize the way they do to run your governments,
Yeah.
they can run your activist movements pretty easily.
Oh yeah. I mean, if people really stop and think about it, if you know about MK Ultra, if you know about all these different psychological programs and the studies that they've been doing on the human mind and all these things for like a long time, like a really long time, they know how a human is going to react to every single thing that they're planning on doing. So if they know how we're going to react, they know there's going to be, you know, between this many and this many % of people, blah, 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 that are going to do this and this and this, then they can easily, you know, pre-plan how they're going to manipulate that and steer it whatever direction they want. So if you think for 1 second that they didn't know we were going to go out, and we already know the convoy was totally a setup, whether, you know, hey, I'm sorry guys, I'm sorry, it was good, it was wonderful, there was lots of good things, but it was planned by and orchestrated by the government of Canada, you know, or the Pope, or whatever way you want to look at it, the Illuminati, whoever you want to say did it. We didn't do it. We followed it like sheep.
100%.
That's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay that I went there and I had a great time and all that, but it happened. So
I will.
if we know, go ahead.
I just want to say too, on that note, it was hijacked by freedom-loving Canadians. They, as much as they planned that,
Yes,
there was way more support than they ever it got out of hand. That's why they were shutting traffic cameras off in Saskatchewan when that convoy was coming across. They did not anticipate what it was. But as far as being organized, aside from all the things we know now, even if you just look at day one when we went downtown, this is what happened. There was Wellington Street, a block up, because I was on Queen and Bay. So we're 1 block up from Wellington. Cop circle around that whole 10 blocks. So all those vehicles got down to Wellington and all the streets going down to Wellington. But then there's a big barricade. But then they let a bunch more in. Then another barricade a couple blocks back. The more you go back and look at your footage, the more you go back through your mind, you can see, well, yeah, if they really didn't want more down there, they just wouldn't have let more. But there's letting a bunch down, then they'd set up a barricade. They'd let a bunch down, then they'd set up another. So they were actually making it bigger themselves.
That's right. They were controlling it 100%. There was a certain individual during the Zoom meetings leading up to that spoke some words that alarmed me right away. You know, we're going to do this, follow the police, they'll direct you where to go. And I'm like, what? Wait a minute. What is this supposed to be? And then sure enough, when they got there, the exact thing that you just described happened. They were, you know, they let them fill up the area that they wanted them to fill up. And then everybody else was directed to the edge of town. There was a whole bunch of side roads in the middle of nowhere that had trucks on them. Nobody even knew they were there. It was just a bunch of crap. It was bull crap. So what I was kind of leading to there is like not just talking about the convoy, just we know for a fact that they did that. So if we know for a fact that they did that, then we know that they planned it before they planned the pandemic. They knew that we were going to react, so they controlled us and tried to get us to go to. And you're right, we hijacked it because they totally wanted us to lose our minds and have this disruption, this eruption, this violent, you know, a January 6th here in Canada. That's what everybody wants. That's or the elites want. And because we didn't give that to them, we won that fight. We won that battle. It doesn't matter what happened with the mandates and all that kind of stuff. People say they were already going to let them off. That's what I believe. They totally manipulated us that way. I don't care about that though, because we won. We didn't do what they said they were going to do.
I agree.
Everybody was like, holy shit, look at Canada. So it was a total success on our behalf, but it was a setup in the beginning. And the only reason that I'm trying to say that is because if we know that's going to happen, then we have to look at what's going to happen with the media. Okay, we're going to start revealing that we're a bunch of liars. We're going to be blatant about it, and the entire right-leaning crew is going to look at that and go, they're liars, I'm not watching this anymore. So if you know that they're not going to watch that anymore, then you create your own media for them. And if anybody doesn't realize this, they can go back and look into the, I don't know how you would really look through it and find it, but if you go back and look at YouTube, there are some channels that are super, super old. And then there's all these ones that popped up right at like just before or right after the beginning of the pandemic. And these are all maybe not all of them. I'm sure there were people out there who had their own, reasons for wanting to get on and make videos and stuff like that. But 90% of these things were created for us to watch. And a lot of the other people just followed that trend and started they just make a video about whatever the media is reporting. And like, that's not going to help anything. You're just talking about what they're talking about and calling them a liar when sometimes they're telling the truth and you're not even catching it. I've seen clickbait after clickbait title and whatever. These are all just, they're thrown there for you, so you can sit there and stare at them and not get the real information, the stuff that's all hidden, the shit that we're just finding out now. So if what I'm basically saying is the PSYOP thing. If you already know that, then you should know that what you're looking at 90% of the time. And these people that are in our movement, not all of them, but a lot of them, a whole lot of the very beginning ones are just people that were set here in our place, in our face, so that we would follow them and gain respect for them and find them as real people. And that's what they're meant to do. That's what infiltrators do. They befriend you, and I've noticed it over and over again. I've ran into it a couple of times. I'm not going to go blasting it all over the internet and start saying, well, this person I think is of this and I think is of that. But if they've got a direct plan, I did it with East Meets West, and I'm not going to take it back. I did it because that was a bad plan and it was bad for this country.
It was.
We can argue about whether or not the guy that was planning it is a bad dude. I don't really care about that, but the plan was bad. And if someone else is out there right now, like you were sorry for rambling so much, guys, but we go back to what Jeremy was saying, was like, there are some people out there who are looking at this stuff and they're not understanding, and they're thinking, oh, the division. It's not division. Some of it is. There are people doing the personal issues thing, but when you look at this, you got to realize, did we call out the shots? Did we say, hey, those shots are bad for you? Well, then we should be calling out these plans that are bad for you too, and saying, look, man, this is the biodigital convergence. This is the disruption. This is this. We should be doing that at all times, respectfully, without bashing, of course. But we should be pointing those things out. And the person who made the post that you're talking about, I saw it as well. And I hope that he doesn't think I'm attacking him, because I'm not. I love him. But this is my explanation to that, is like, we can't just be quiet about those things. Otherwise, we're just going to keep following the same path. And what happens when we do screw ourselves permanently? We're not going to be having this conversation.
Well, that's just, and I saw your comment on there too. It's just not long before we went live ourselves, and I love him to death. But not everybody was in this for the same reasons we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to. They did a good job. That's all. They did a good job, and you saw it firsthand. People who went against the counter narrative, they got destroyed. They got destroyed. They got run through the fucking mud. So there's probably a lot of people who are scared. I've had her comment on the screen for a long time, so I wanted to say, Kim says, same when we went to Winnipeg. They blocked the highway. If you're referring to the World Unity Convoy, that was a paid up party. That was the World Unity Convoy in Winnipeg. That was a reunion of a way to pass messages to people to continue their control of the counter narrative. That's why there were people who are not traditional to what they say they are, native wise, who purposely dropped eagle feathers on stages, and the list goes on. But don't feel bad about that, Kim, by any means. Like, we were all deceived by.
Oh yeah, I've been deceived many times in this. I don't want anybody to think I'm sitting up here thinking, I'm not sitting on a pedestal up here going, you guys are all dumb and no, absolutely not. I've been tricked many times and I still fall for things. It's the way it works. That's why I'm so I'm looking for it all the time, because it's like, man, we can't be falling for this shit, and even I get sucked into it. So again,
Well,
love you
that's
guys.
like and that's why like sometimes I get so emotional when people just want to cast it as, oh, you know, that's just a coincidence. Like, no, it's not. I had to learn the hard way. I'm begging you to, you don't have to listen to everything and trust everything I'm saying, but just fucking watch. And excuse my language, but when somebody is pouring their life out after what they've been through, and you know, like they said, I don't hold it against anybody if they don't want to listen, but at least intake the information and watch.
Yeah.
Defend yourself. Because I was all in. Like, what can we do? What can I do? I have a voice. I have a following. Like, what can I do? I got to support everything that's actionable. That's the way I thought in 2023, and even the first 3 months of 2024. I felt my duty with a voice and a following was to, if there was positive action, I had to be there. I had to support it. That was my role. And until Axe the Tax, when they fisted me, and just like, but I was literally boots on the ground there, calling them out. It's like something's shit ain't right here. They had to shut me out, but I just wish people would listen. You know, we didn't learn the hard way, so that everybody else had to as well.
Right.
It's the same.
Well, I don't think anybody tried to destroy me, but I did definitely run into some blatant lies and just outright just, whoa, I can't believe that person just did that. That's not for what we're doing. You know, and then when that happens, it's like, okay, I really got to reassess, who am I looking at here? What's going on here? And then I found out a lot of things since all that. And
one of the most common things they do is they prey on your emotion. They know that most of us in the public eye, we're emotional, passionate people. That's how we got to be in the public eye. And as soon as you go against their narrative and you can no longer be dictated to, they glorify your reaction to their action. And that's what makes you it's textbook narcissist. It's also textbook Freemasonry. It's once you understand how these secret societies have worked for thousands of years. You know, I used to say it to Andrew and Carl. They're like, really? People are doing that? And I'm like, just watch. And 2 weeks later, they'd be like, oh shit, look at that happening again. And I'm like, it shouldn't be that hard to believe with the things we're learning. We're learning about these secret societies. We're learning about what they've done to people in the past. You know, it's
if you think for 1 minute we're going to have any kind of anything in this country without a CSIS, infiltration, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts to think that, you know. And I was naive at the beginning. Everybody probably was, but now, come on, like we're 5 years in, like, of the Great Awakening. Oh, wake up, you know, as nicely as I can say it, wake up. You got to stop playing this game.
I see many that are. Amanda says they have hijacked podcasters as well. Absolutely, they have. That was one of the first things they hijacked. You know. Pam says, "I am sorry, but I have zero sympathy for the police after what they did to everyone at the Freedom Convoy. It's totally uncalled for." I agree with that comment. I won't say that I disagree with it, but I don't fully agree with it. But I do agree with it. And this is why. I'm a big believer in whether or not you're the bad cop. If you know there's bad cops, you're no different than the bad cop. And that's, I hear a lot of cops say, "Oh, we didn't support what happened in Ottawa." But what did you do about it then? Did you just went back to work? You just went back to work and put the badge on. Yeah. So like, if you didn't agree with what happened, like I know myself, if I was and it's hard to put yourself in somebody's shoes, but to my best ability, if I was an RCMP officer and I did not agree with what happened there, I would have found it very hard to go to work the next day and put that badge on. So I don't care that you want to tell me that you didn't agree with it. What are you doing to not agree with it?
That's right. You know, fear is a killer. You know what I mean? Fear is a killer. But the thing that bothers me the most about it is a lot of these, like, I know that there was a lot of them that were against it, and I know that a lot of them, and there were a lot of them that were totally for it. They wanted to beat the shit out of us. They loved it. But the ones that didn't, you know, they sat around in the coffee room and, you know, and they were whispering to each other and shit. And they never once said, you know what, let's all just do it. Let's just fucking walk out of here right now. You know what I mean? But then you also, and we can't walk out of here. We have to protect the city. You know, like, just this psychological thing just rolls through, and there's so many different stuff. So I totally agree. Yes, there's bad. Yes, it's bad not to say anything. I can't say that they're not all, I can't say that they're all bad or that I hate them all or have lost all respect for police, because I do have respect for a lot of the ones that I've dealt with. They've been really nice and cooperative and haven't been invasive. There's a few that haven't been so happy about, but you know, it's personality thing. Some want to be tyrants, some just want to help, you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I wouldn't say that I don't like to say hate because it's such a bad. I would say that I detest all police officers because of what happened there. But I will say that I know from a few instances since then, I now have a trauma reaction to it. I will say that.
That's understandable. I wasn't there for the violence.
From watching what they did because what they were doing is, say there was me and a woman, they would go for the woman because they were trying to provoke us. And I know that's their orders, but they're still doing it.
Those are human beings that took those orders and carried them out. You know,
Right.
It didn't stop.
Like it may be an order, but you still have a choice.
I definitely detest those guys 100%. There's no way I could, for no matter the reason. I mean, I don't care if I thought those people were the scum of the earth. I couldn't do what they did to, you know, I've never really.
Never.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
And that's what it comes back to. And I've said that to a few police officers since. Even when they said, you know, I didn't support what happened in that, you know, there was it changed my view of things after that. And I'm like, okay, but it happened. I still hear women screaming from men that took an oath to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
This is Canada. And now we know what Canada is now, but at the same time, those were unarmed women. And a lot of them still had their children beside them on the line. One of my favorite pictures is Luke Lubinsky. I think he's the photographer. He had a black and white picture of the front line, and they're all in their fucking gear with their masks, and it's this little girl holding a rosary. It's one of my favorite pictures.
Me too.
Like it just, as soon as I see that picture, it just takes me back there, and it's like, how could you do that?
Yeah,
like
it's true.
We weren't at war. It was a peaceful protest.
It felt at times like I wasn't there for the police lineups and all that stuff. I mean, I obviously saw cops when we were up there, but they seemed like more, you know, walking the beat friendly type people most of the time, or they just didn't say anything. But when I was in Toronto, there was every week and I went up there every week for a while, and there was always this, like, I don't know, I think they were RCMP, but there was this like lineup of them, and they would like just like robots, like they would not either. It was almost like they weren't even blinking. Like, it was insane how, like, just brick walls, man. You couldn't, and you know, like, people are trying to talk to them and like have like nothing, not even they didn't flinch, nothing.
No
Like, yeah, it's wild. And I know they're trained for that, but you're also trained to care about the people that you're supposed to be protecting. So, I mean, what happened to that part?
Exactly. And I one of the most distinctive moments, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I think it was day 2 of when the cops were brutal. Excuse me. There was 3 days. Yes, because it was the afternoon after Canada, because we were pushed back. We were past like the main intersection. We were west of Wellington down there, probably closer to where the vehicles entered Parliament. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And there was an instance, and I think it was Jim Kerr There was a lot of us on the lot, and Jim Kerr yelled out, "Where is Sergeant whatever his name was?" And he's, "I've got your mother in the comments, and she's telling you to stand down." And when he yelled that, the looks on a lot of their faces on that front line changed like that.
That's actually pretty cool. I didn't know he did that. That's neat.
It was wild. And then about 10-15 minutes later, there was somebody else over to my left that yelled it out. "I've got one." There was a different officer's mother on there telling them, and their faces changed. But what happened was these guys who were giving orders from the back were coming up, tapped them on the shoulder and swapping them. As soon as they saw a motion and a guy in the line, they'd swap them out.
Mhm.
So,
That's,
just shows they wanted robots. They wanted, if you showed emotion at all, they would swap you the fuck out of there.
that's insane, but believable.
It is. So like I said, I didn't have a whole lot lined up here. I got a 30-minute video here. I'm gonna start that here in a minute. Corey, do you have anything else you want to add before we?
Just because you mentioned Jim Kerr, actually, when we were talking about the PSYOP thing, something that he told me came to mind, and something that I said in a conversation came to mind. So a long time ago, this is like a story that sticks in my head. I've told it before on a video, I think with him. He told me that when COVID hit, it was like a bowling ball in a bath of bubbles, and the bubbles shot up into the air and they flew all over the place. And he was telling me this in a way to let me know, because I was really frustrated the way everybody was going different directions. I was super frustrated about that. And this was his way of like calming me down about it, saying that, like these bubbles are all in the air and they're all going to float and they're going to find their own path, but eventually they're going to settle. And when they settle, they're going to settle into their own little communities, their own little places. And that stuck with me for a long time. Well, fast forward to, this last few weeks, and there was someone, actually, I think it was a couple months ago, but someone had asked me, how do we tell who these people are? How do we know who the PSYOPs in the movement are? And I said to them, well, I mean, I guess I'm going to have to tell you it's Jim because my response, but whatever. I was talking to Jim. He said, how do you find these people? And I said, you just look at the bubbles, all those little bubbles that settled in those communities. There's one bubble sitting on the top of each one of those. And all you have to do is look over at, and they're keeping them in that little community bubble. You're not allowed to jump over to another community. And you can see that. If you look at the top bubble, you'll see them holding the rest of the bubbles down. That's all you got to do. And I know that sounds pretty vague, but it's actually true. You just look around, just watch patterns.
In that circle. And if you try to stop that merry-go-round, holy shit.
Oh yeah, it's a shit show. And flying monkeys come out. Remember that term? The flying monkeys come out all over. They were just ready to just stab you with every arrow because you said something. And again, I said something positive about a person one time, and their flying monkeys came at me hard, and I couldn't understand it, but they didn't understand what I was saying. So it was like, whoa. But like one of those situations, it just blows your mind. But yeah,
it's crazy.
Get it?
That's a big point of it. One of the first things I started looking for was the gatekeeping. It was, if you started like us, for instance, we're not favoring the left, the right. We're grouping them all together. If you started to do that, you were a threat.
Yeah.
And it was
another one is the cutout.
Shouldn't you? I thought you'd be happy about this. Like what? Like.
Yeah. And another one that I noticed is the cutouts too. You'll have somebody with a super good idea, or what we think is a good idea. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And then it gets just starts to take off. And then the name changes. It goes to a different person. That person is shit. They did something bad. They're kicked out, And then everything, there's this latching thing. I've even seen it happen in small situations. A really good idea will get hijacked. And then the hijacking will just drive it right off a cliff. And it's like, whoa. But if you just remember those things and look around and see them, you can tell what's what. It's really easy.
It's true. All right. Well, I'm going to fire up this video. I'll let you just go observe. You don't have to sit on here. I'm going to
get out of here.
Back myself off as well. Thanks for joining us, brother. We'll be a little more prepared next time, but we're 55 minutes into conversation with no planning. So.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, brother. Much love.
All right. Talk to you guys soon. Love you.
Have a good night. All right, let's fire up this video here, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
So who are the people right after the flood, before the Tower of Babel, and also after? Now, when we look at the history, we need to look at the evidence of these first humans and the gods or God they worshipped. A lot of people think that the ancient Sumerians were just strange people that's not connected to the Bible at all. From Adam to Noah, there was 10 generations. But the 7th generation, something started to happen. Where do all our religions come from originally? Let's take a look at the Blackheads first. Who are they? Where do they come from? There's even some writings that talk about how these Nephilim drank the blood of humans as well, and some people had rituals. But take a look at how Genesis describes this period. Hey guys, today we're starting with a new series that might scare your socks off or surprise you beyond belief, because we're going to dig deep. We're going to look into the origin of all religions, when and how it all started and changed over the centuries. This series is so important because we human beings, we live according to what we believe, right? The problem is our beliefs differ. One person's right is another person's wrong. In other words, not everyone can be right. So we have to ask ourselves, how and why are we really here on Earth? What created the universe with time, space, and matter? And of course, those three things had to come into existence at the exact same time. We also have to ask ourselves, where do we go when we die? And we have to ask, is there different worlds out there, different dimensions, spiritual beings, or aliens? Now, to answer these very important questions, there are other questions we need to answer first. Where do all our religions come from originally? In other words, who were the first humans and what gods or God did they worship? Before Islam, before the Romans, Greeks, Aztecs, and before ancient Egypt. Now, when we look at history, we need to look at the evidence of these first humans and the gods or God they worshipped. One of the best and the most historically descriptive books out there, or sources, is the book of Genesis, with so much detail, written by Moses in Hebrew around 3,400 years ago, and who had a high-quality Egyptian education, as he basically grew up with the Pharaoh. But it is not the oldest written down information we have. So in this series, I want to focus on all the other historical writings before Moses to see if these recordings agree with what Moses wrote. Now we know all human cultures and languages can be traced back to the land of ancient Mesopotamia that began before and after the Great Flood. The people first settled down on and around Mount Ararat, according to the pottery evidence we have there. And then, over time, some families gradually moved down from the mountains of Ararat after the flood to dwell in the land of Sumer. Most of them were known as the Semites and Sumerians. Now, we have to look at what these cultures wrote down, because they were there, right? We weren't. So, do we have any ancient writings? Yes. Many of these tablets were lost into history, but many have been found, especially the 30,000 tablets that were collected in a library at Nineveh, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Assyrian king Ashur-banipal boasted about collecting it all. From these ancient records, we know that these people, the ancient Sumerians, called themselves the black-headed people. This is interesting because it means they wanted to differentiate themselves from other people who also lived in this time, who probably started to spread throughout the world. What is shocking is that these blackheads recorded in their legends that all weapons, tools, and amazing inventions were given to them by the gods, plural. Wow, these people received some special knowledge from these beings. Some people today say that they are aliens. More about that later. First, we need to talk about who these people were and the gods they worshipped. Let's take a look at the blackheads first. Who are they? Where do they come from? According to their writings, they were created at a place called Nippur, the place where heaven and earth connects, comes together, which means the realm of humans and gods. Now, we already know that they lived before the flood, the great deluge, in the antediluvian world, but also after that. We know that they moved down from the Mount of Ararat because of the pottery we found, and they moved into the plains, ancient Sumeria. Remember, at this time, all the people spoke the same language before and right after the flood, up until the Tower of Babel, also known as a temple, also known as a ziggurat. When new languages came and spread into all the world. Now, according to their records, they were created as male and female. Very unlike what people say today, right? That there are more genders. But more about this later. They were created to be male and female with a command to multiply on the earth and to work the ground. Sounds very similar to the book of Genesis. It was written in Hebrew, a language that came much later. It is the same story, but the Hebrew book of Genesis covers it in more specific detail. And there's a lot more manuscripts of it. Now, just to make this clear, one thing to keep in mind, just because something is written first, it doesn't make that true. For example, let me give an example here, because people are people and people lie, right? Because they have agendas. A good example is what happened with Trump. The first news company said Trump fell to the ground at speech, while actually he ducked because he was shot at. Then later, with time, some sources accurately said it was an attempted assassination, and they had more detail. Now, humans don't change, right? They lie. Some people believe lies. Some people write down lies, and they don't even know that they believe lies, right? But it is clear that almost all ancient sources, the evidence points to the fact that there was a global flood, that people lived before the flood. When we look at the book of Genesis, when we look at the Apocrypha books, like the book of Enoch, when we look at what the Sumerians wrote down on their tablets, and they explain what the world before the flood was like. The Apocrypha, for example, explains that fallen angels rebelled against the Most High God. Then they fell to earth, led by a fallen angel called Azazel, who specifically came to Cain's descendants to give them secret arts and to sleep with the woman to create the Nephilim. They were mixed breeds of angel and human DNA, most of them powerful giants. Now, people wanted to, and some were forced to worship them. These fallen angels and Nephilim lived among these people as gods ruling over them. Now, regarding the pre-flood world, the antediluvian world, it is interesting what Gary Wayne wrote in his books called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. He said Cain and the fallen angels transformed the Sumerian sect from a nomadic hunter and gatherer society into an agrarian-based society. Cain, Enoch, and the fallen angels then transformed the Sumerians into a society of builders and masons, worshipping the 7 sacred sciences, along with their false gods, just as the craft legends recorded. Now, please don't confuse this Enoch with the good Enoch from the family line of Noah and Seth. This is the evil Enoch from the line of Cain. They have the same names. Now, many ancient writings explain how evil the world became before the flood, including the Bible, Genesis. It became so evil with these fallen angels, the Nephilim, aka demigods, and evil cities of people who just did evil continually. Murder, rituals, rape. It was a society of evil people who immersed themselves in mysticism and even other unthinkable sin, like sacrificing people, that became so bad that God had to purge the world with a global flood. There's even some writings that talk about how these Nephilim drank the blood of humans as well, and some people had rituals. But take a look at how Genesis describes this period of complete evil. Genesis 6 verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every, not some, every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. You see, there was no other choice but for God to stop it. Just think about the unthinkable hurt, pain, and suffering everybody went through. Kids grew up in this sick world. So God came and he purged it, specifically also because of the fallen angels and Nephilim and because of what they did. Now, the black-headed people, the ancient Sumerians, they also said there was a great flood. The most famous record of this is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Then there are others, like the Athrosis epic and the Sumerian king list. Then, as time went on after the Sumerians, other cultures came, and we also read from their writings, their records, that there was a flood. And after the flood, there was a man that survived. Most of them also talk about his family. And then they repopulated the whole earth. Their names changed because languages changed. The Bible mentions Noah and his 3 sons. The ancient Sumerians called him Zuesudra in one of their writings. In another, Ubnapishtam. In Greek mythology, they call him Deucalion. In Hindu mythology, we have Manu. In Chinese mythology, we have Fuhai. And even in Hawaiian mythology, we have Nu'u. And the list goes on and on. Most cultures in the world have stories about the flood. Why? Because there was a flood. I already covered this in my video called The Things Most People Don't Know About the Flood. Please check it out after this video. Now, there's also something very interesting about Atlantis that's connected with the time period before the flood, but I will come back to this later in this series. When people forget this time period, from the beginning of the world, creation to the flood, was actually a very long period of time. Some cultures called it the first time or the golden age. Adam is called King Ataba in the Sumerian king list, or Adama in Sumerian lore. So this was the time period that the Sumerians described as before the flood, where this king Ataba was seen as the Sangal Rugal, which just means priest and king. So it wasn't just a king, but a priest. A priest to who? The God Most High, they called him. The ancient Sumerians called their god An or Anu, A-N or A-N-U. And it was written down in a star form on cuneiform. Very, very interesting why, and I'll come back to that later. Now, he had 2 sons. An had Enlil and also Enki. Anu, translated from ancient Sumeria, means heaven, and was used to refer to the God Most High, the parent god. Then Enki, translated from Sumerian, literally means Lord of the earth. And then Enlil was also known as the king of the gods, just like his father An, the God Most High. The Sumerians also say that he, Enlil, was the one who sent the flood. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and we will get to it as we continue with this series. And then when you find out who they really are and who we know them as today, it is going to shock you. But I want to get back very quickly to something important. From Adam to Noah, there was 10 generations. But the 7th generation, something started to happen. The world became very evil. And it's this time where the fallen angels bred but slept, maybe it's a bad word, but anyway, slept with human women to create the Nephilim mixed breeds of fallen angel and human DNA. The Sumerians called the fallen angels and the Nephilim gods, all of them. The Apocrypha books call them Watchers and the Shining Ones, aka Nephilim. Other cultures later also called them gods, titans, and demigods. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but I have some big and exciting news to share. I'm writing a novel with my brother set in the world before the flood. And I have to say, it's going to feel like a mix of fantasy and historical fiction, much like Lord of the Rings, Warcraft, or Narnia. But here's the best part. It's based on biblical and archaeological truths. In this book, we're diving deep into the ancient world of fallen angels, the Nephilim, and the family lines of Adam, specifically Seth and Cain. We'll get to experience how they lived in cities like Nippur and Eridu, how they fell into darkness, and how they became so evil in a world filled with beasts and dragons, like the Behemoth and Leviathan, described in the book of Job. If you've ever wondered what the world was like before the flood, then this novel is going to bring it to life in a way you've never seen before. It's packed with action, spiritual battles, and deep insights into humanity's early struggles. And here's the exciting part. I'm giving you, my amazing subscribers, all of you who follow me here on DLM, free access to the first few chapters of the book for free. All you got to do is click the link in the video description below, enter your name and email, and we'll send it to you as soon as it is ready. Now, if you're watching this video much later, this book might already be out. So you can just get it at our website, www.dlm-christianlifestyle.com. Now, this book is also perfect for non-believers or even those on the fence with their faith, because it's a gripping story that pulls you in, and before you know it, if you're roundabout in the middle to the end of the book, you'll realize how it aligns with God's word, the Bible. Thanks for sticking with me. Now, let's get back to the message of today. Now, let me read Genesis 6, verse 4 for you. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, meaning after the flood, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. In this time, people moved away from worshiping the God Most High and started to worship these other gods, fallen angels as gods, and also their offspring, mixed breeds, Nephilim, as gods, especially when they got the new knowledge and went into mysticism and rituals. It became so evil that God had to stop it with a great flood. But according to Genesis, Noah was a righteous man. God saved him and his family. So after the flood, they repopulated the earth. Other cultures call him different names because they have different languages, right? And we get an idea of how big this population could have been up until the Tower of Babel and also after that. It was roughly over 60 families before the Tower of Babel, which is over 8,000 people in just 3 generations, if you use the timeline of the Masoretic text. The Septuagint text timeline will work out even more. Then at the Tower of Babel, of course, God confused their languages and they spread throughout the world, but there were still people living there in ancient Mesopotamia after the Tower of Babel. A. John M. Osgood wrote, the population 350 years after the flood could be massive. Theoretically, if we do not count conflict, disease, and infant mortality, a figure of 3.5 million could be present if we use the number of males in the first and second generations mentioned in Genesis 10. And assume on average male reproduction rate of 3 generations and a generation time of 30 years, according to Genesis 11. The population would be 88 million if at this time it was a 4-family generation, and 634 million if a 5-family generation. I have approximated the count of first and second generation post-flood male groups in Genesis 10 to be 65. Of course, this is only counting males. We doubled that for the total population. So who are the people right after the flood, before the Tower of Babel, and also after it? Well, we need to look at Noah's sons. Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Of course, there were also the Nephilim. Remember, Genesis 6 says there were the Nephilim in those days and also after it. But it will take me a whole video just to explain how it is possible that they can be there afterwards as well, after the flood. But we need to start here with Noah's sons. So let's start with Shem first. Shem brought forth Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lut, and Aram. So he is important because for those of you who do not know, he is the father of a lot of nations, but one of those nations is Israel. Of course, the father of Israel is Abraham, and Abraham comes from Shem. Now, this is extremely important because Abraham is the 9th generation from Shem. And Shem was still alive when Abraham was there. A lot of people don't know this. This is important to understand. Remember, Shem and his 2 brothers still came from the pre-flood world with good DNA. But after them, the lifespan of people started to be shorter after the flood. Shem lived to be 600 years old, while Abraham died at 175. What is even more shocking is that Shem was still alive when Abraham died. What this means is that Abraham, not just him, but also all his fathers going up the generations, could have easily learned from Shem and even Noah himself what the pre-flood world was like, that relationship. They could have seen how Noah still worshiped God, the God Most High. And they could have written it down, and we just never discovered it, and maybe it's just lost. And then, of course, after Abraham, Moses wrote it down. The first 5 books, in fact, of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. 5 books. In case you didn't know, the nation of Israel comes from Abraham, his son Isaac, and then Jacob. And the Muslims today also through Abraham's son Ishmael. Now, the Semites come from Shem. Shem Semites, right? In ancient Sumer. That's where they come from. A lot of people think that the ancient Sumerians were just strange people that's not connected to the Bible at all. Well, most of them come from the line of Ham. I'll explain this as we continue. Moses called Sumer Shinar because of his Egyptian education in the book of Genesis. Genesis 11 verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, Sumer, and settled there. Now, what a lot of people don't know is the first people, the first families who came to the plains to live in ancient Sumeria was the people from Shem, the Semites. Check this out. In answersresearchjournal.org, this map shows the Ubite, who is named after Arphaxad, the son of Shem, son of Noah, close to the Iranian Susiana, who is Elam, Samara on the mid-Tigris, Hasuna, who is Asher, further north, then Halaf, which is Aram. Now, I want this video to be very interesting, and I don't want it to be too long, so I don't have all the time to go into detail of how, the different routes they took from the mountains of Ararat to go into the plains. And we know that from the pottery that we found in different areas. But let me just try to quickly summarize it. The Ubaid cultural period is named after a site in southern Iraq today that used to be ancient Persia, called Ubaid, where a specific type of early pottery was found. The exact same pottery was then found at Eridu, and the lowest levels of Uruk, and was judged to be one of the earliest cultures in southern Mesopotamia as we know it. So let me make this simple. The Ubaid culture comes from Ur of the Chaldees. And those who read their Bibles know that this is where Abram comes from, who later became Abraham. The Ubaid people, together with Samara on the mid-Tigris, Hazuna further north, Then Halaf was the earliest archaeologically defined cultures of the Mesopotamian plain. In other words, all these cultures were probably Semitic, coming from the line of Shem, known initially as Shemer, Shumer, Sumer, which basically means the land of Shem. This is very important to understand because the Uruk culture came much later. From Ham, the Hamites, who then erected the Tower of Babel, which was Nimrod, Ham's grandson. This is important to understand because most of the ancient Sumerian writings, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, come from these people. According to Osgood, all of these cultures can be retrospectively traced back to the areas around the western area close to Lake Urmia by pottery culture and stone cultures. So Lake Urmia is just east of Mount Ararat, and then first came Shem, his family, and then later followed Ham. David Roll, Poobel, and Kramer has indicated that the name Sumer, biblical Shinar, is derived from the name of the father of its first inhabitants, Shem, the second son of Noah. Shem, in brackets Semitic, is from Shemer, Shumer, in brackets Sumerian. The unpronounced R is dropped in the Semitic. Shemer, Shumer, is known to us as Sumer. The Egyptian name was Sennar and was placed in the Bible as Shinar by the Egyptian-trained Moses, a rebuke to the fallacious claims against Mosaic authorship of Genesis. The Egyptians placed Sennar, in brackets Sumer, in ancient Mesopotamia. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of Noah and his sons. What do? You just arrive on Mount Ararat, the waters are still going down. What do? Go far, travel wide? No, first you start to put up shelters close by. You start to live on and around Mount Ararat. You wait for the waters to recede. You set up survival camps and you have kids to help you survive in this new world. Then later, once you have set up basic survival strategies, you and your children, as they grow into adults, might start to venture out into different directions. But family groups will stick together to survive. Osgood said, "It is likely that as the ice period began to develop after the flood, the mountains would have become less hospitable for some, and so they would have moved down into the plain. Such was the early action of the sons of Shem. But it appears that not too long after this, Cush and his sons followed, settling first in lower Mesopotamia near the Euphrates." Who is this Cush? Well, this is important because Cush is the son of Ham. He is an important figure because Nimrod comes from Cush, who erected the Tower of Babel and who actually became the first world leader. He's very important. And then what about Adam's other son, Japheth? How did they set up nations, religions, and have war with each other in ancient Mesopotamia with their god or gods? That is what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this series. So please remember, if you're new here, subscribe so you won't miss that video. And never forget,